Welcome to Shoot Like a Girl, a podcast featuring interviews with extraordinary military women from around the world who push their limits on and off duty. I'm your host, Kate Stewart, and this is episode number 2. Today's guest is 2nd Lieutenant Ruth Robinson. Ruth was the 4th woman to serve as a tomb guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. The honor of tomb guard is incredibly rare. The badge is the least awarded badge in the U.S. Army and the second least awarded badge in the U.S. military, trailing only the Astronaut Badge. Ruth currently works as a federal wildlife officer and is a member of the Army National Guard.
Steady, steady, nice and steady. Right, hill, cover. I'm a steamroller, baby. I'm a steamroller, baby. Just rolling down the line. Just a rolling down the line. I'm a steamroller, baby. I'm a steamroller, baby. Just a rolling down the line. Just a rolling down the line. So you better get out of my way now. So you better get out of my way now. Before I roll all over you. Before I roll all over you.
Welcome, Ruth. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
I was on a leadership course and we were getting ready for our drill test where we have to teach drill to potentially new students. And we were looking up videos online and we came across all of these videos from the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier because obviously you guys have the most immaculate drill ever. And we saw the videos of you. And then when I came up with this idea for the podcast, I thought, oh, she would be the perfect guest to have on. So I'm really excited to have you today.
I appreciate you thinking about having me on this podcast. It's a really neat opportunity, and for you to have thought of it is a really, really neat idea.
All right. So what part of the USA did you grow up in?
I'm originally from Waco, Texas, and then it was junior high to high school, my parents moved us out to California. I got recruited to play soccer at Birmingham Southern College out in Alabama, where I finished my degree in 2010 in biology. I did a couple of internships with the Forest Service and Park Service, then joined the Army in 2011, and I was stationed out in Fort Carson, Colorado. And then I deployed from there to Afghanistan. When I was in Afghanistan, I was trying to think of my next move. That's where the tomb kind of came up. And then I finished my career out active duty wise at Fort Myer at the tomb.
Okay.
And now I live back in Virginia.
When you were growing up, but did you have any family in the military?
Yes, I have a huge family background in the military. Both my grandfathers were in, my father was in, my brother and my sister served, my husband still serves, and I've had various cousins in as well.
So a big family history of that. So was that something that was on your radar from the very beginning, that you thought once you finished school you were going to serve?
Yes, it was definitely on my radar, but I wanted to go to school first and finish college before I joined the military. Heard too many stories of, going into the military and not having the ability or were unable to finish school. So school was definitely on my top priority.
Yeah, I'd say that's a smart move. I sort of did about half of a degree before I joined, and now I'm working on that distance education piece, and I feel like it's going to take forever now, doing a few courses at a time. So definitely smart to get that finished first.
Yeah, I understand the distance learning. I finished my master's degree this past spring, and it was 2 years of distance learning, which is not necessarily the most fun, but it was a good thing to do.
And that's sort of becoming the norm now with the whole COVID thing, and all the universities are sort of moving towards that for the fall, but definitely has its advantages and disadvantages.
Agreed.
So in Canada, we call them trades or MOS. What was your job in the military?
So my MOS or military occupational specialties, 31 Bravo military police. So that's what I joined up to do. And then, so when I got to the Old Guard, I was there in the military police unit. And then you can volunteer for the specialty platoons. That even though it's the 3rd Infantry Regiment, you still have all the support MOSs there. So there's cooks, finance, and mechanics, things like that. So as long as you're, in the military there, then you have the ability to do anything you really want when you're assigned there.
Interesting. So you deployed to Afghanistan as a military police?
Yes, military police. I did protective services detail.
That would be what we would call in Canada close protection.
Yes,
And what part of Afghanistan were you in at that time?
I was in Kabul.
Okay. Actually, my husband was in Kandahar. And then there's quite a few Canadians who were in both areas, Kabul and Kandahar as well.
Yeah, while we were there at Kabul, there was our fair share of Canadians, and they always got to do cooler stuff than we did. Or that's what we thought anyway. So
I'm sure that there are probably lots of Canadians who think that the Americans did cooler stuff than they did as well. So was it the same person that you were doing protective services for? Or it was whoever was coming into the country at the time?
no, it was one like command group we were in charge of. So the general, the colonel, and the sergeant major, and anybody else that either they tasked us out to that would help support their mission and things like that. But mainly just those three.
Did you enjoy it while you were doing it?
I had a great team to work with, and
Mhm.
so that made it enjoyable as much as you really can have an enjoyable deployment, I suppose.
There were sort of certain times in that area where the IED threat has been higher. What was it like when you were over there?
Yeah, we still had that, daily threat between that and like VBIEDs. So it was a daily threat we had over there.
And then it was while you were over there that you sort of started thinking about what you were going to do next when you got back to the States?
Yep, I had been at Carson at that point about 2 years or so, and about every 3 years it was kind of time for a PCS, and I was deciding kind of where I wanted to go. I want to go to the East Coast because that's where my at the time boyfriend, now husband, was. So I was looking at different places to go. I had been to the tomb before and not really thought too much, in terms of military career at it because it was just visiting.
Hmm.
And I actually had the opportunity to speak with the tomb guard downrange while I was in Afghanistan, and that really kind of helped solidify that that was what I wanted to do. And anybody who interacted with me on a daily basis there knew that that is exactly what I wanted to go do. And even before I made it to Fort Myer, a lot of the chain of command there was already tracking that was exactly what I wanted to go do. I was going to Fort Myer to go be a tomb guard, or at least try to be a tomb guard.
They were very supportive of you doing that?
Yes, they were, which was
Okay.
I was very thankful for because it's not necessarily always the case.
It really makes a difference to have your chain of command supportive. It makes me think like, okay, in my future, if I'm ever in that position, I'd want to, try as much as I could to give that person the opportunity to better themselves and to chase what it is that they want to do rather than to keep shutting that down for them.
Absolutely.
So for that, you have to transfer to the old guard. Is that the idea?
Yes. So
Okay.
the old guard is just what's called the Third Infantry Regiment, like any other Army installation. So I was at Fort Carson. It was Fourth Infantry Division. Then you have a whole bunch of units underneath it. So this is the old guard, Third Infantry Regiment, and then underneath it you have like battalions and companies. So it's the same thing. It's just what they're known as.
And they do a lot of the ceremonial things.
Yes, so they have like a lot of the ceremonies for full honors funerals, all in Arlington National Cemetery. Any funerals that go in Arlington National Cemetery, the Old Guard, or our sister services, whether it's Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard, we are all assigned in that general area to take care of those funerals.
Do you have to go through a selection process or is it a course to become a tomb guard?
For the tomb guard, you volunteer to go down. And when I went down there, we went through this. It's called TDY, or like temporary duty, for 2 weeks, where they teach you the guard change sequence and the rifle manual, how they do their uniforms down there, and you start memorizing your first 7 of 17 pages of knowledge to become a tomb guard.
And is that something
And
that people can fail off of, or are they just sort of assessed based on how well they do?
Uh, you can fail, but they're definitely assessed on how well you do. It's, basically that 2 weeks tells you if they're trainable or not. They
So,
want to put in the effort and the heart and the drive. There's always going to be challenges that are going to come up that are going to, unforeseen to them, but you just kind of assess how they are as a soldier and if they're trainable, and, you bring them on and you start the training process.
Okay, so from there, is it a certain number of people that are selected?
I mean, if sometimes you have a class of 4, sometimes you have 6, 8, 10.
There's no max number kind of thing?
Nope. You want to come down there, we'll gladly take you and start training you.
And then from there, after that 2 weeks, how long is the training process until they are then outstanding guard duty?
You have up to a year to complete training for the Tomb Guard badge, which is what you get awarded at the end if you pass training. But we call it out the door. You can get out the door pretty quick if you sit down and work at it. So as long as you have good outside, which is your rifle manual and your guard change, you have to know your knowledge because it'll increase as you go through training from 7 all the way up to 17 pages. And your uniform and everything has to be good. Let's call it out the door. And if all of that works, then you can start earning your walks to go outside. And before you start earning them to walk to go outside during the daytime, when the cemetery is open, you do what we call a bolo, which is a be on the lookout. So an hour before the cemetery opens and an hour after the cemetery closes, that's when what we call the new men or the new soldiers down there are bloused up in their blues, walking the mat with a tomb guard that is a badge holder out there, what we call gigging them to make them better, telling them about their rifle angles and their any kind of angles, how they're walking to help smooth them out to make them look out, look like a tomb guard and be out the door ready.
Would they potentially be out the door before their badge?
Oh yes, you definitely out the door before your badge. The badge can take anywhere. I've seen as quick as 4 months is extremely rare, but it's usually about 9 or 10 months. So in order to get better outside, you have to get outside.
Right.
So
Yeah.
usually within the first month or two, you might start getting out the door in front of the public. It really just a lot of it can depend on the soldier.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, so these 17 pages, I've read that you have to memorize them verbatim, including all of the punctuation.
Yes. It helps
Aspect.
with the attention to detail.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you memorize it. Those first 7 pages, whenever you give a public brief, those first 7 pages is a lot of what the public brief is to give the history of the tomb and know about what we do. So that's another reason why it's so important.
And so when they're not on guard duty, then they would be giving these public briefs.
The public briefs are for when you're further along in training, getting close to badge test or after badge test, and you're a badge holder. Otherwise, it's the learning the knowledge, and you'll get quizzed on it in order to earn a walk to be able to go out and guard the unknowns because it's a privilege, so you earn it.
I also heard that it's something like 3 minutes that you're supposed to be able to be in your uniform ready to go out the door.
Yes. So basically, we wear khakis and a polo down there, and whenever you get quizzed, if you earn the walk, they say 3 minutes go. It's the purpose of it is because if say a guard goes down outside for some reason or has a uniform malfunction, we're supposed to have them replaced within 5 minutes. So that 3 minutes is to get whatever you're in into your dress uniform and back up front to get bloused up, with a minute to get ready and then a minute for the guard change to get outside to have the guard relieved if there was an issue out there.
Okay, so there's always sort of someone on standby in the background just in case there is an issue.
Kind of, yes and no, because we're down there when everything's going on, they're training, and then if something happens and I say, hey, 3 minutes go, I need you to go up, you run back there with a sense of purpose to get your uniform on to go up and guard the unknowns.
So while you're a member of the guard, are you living there in the barracks or are you sort of off base in your own apartment?
The younger enlisted are on post in the barracks, and usually the NCOs, or if you're married and stuff like that in the Army, you live off post. So I had an off post apartment, which is where I lived. But when you're there on duty, there are places in quarters where, like when it's nighttime and you're not out actively guarding, there's a place where you can rest.
And so the ones that are standing the guard, those are the tomb guards, and then the ones doing the inspection, what are they referred to as?
They're also tomb guards, but the way we talk about it is the ones who are on the mat, they're walkers.
Okay.
because they're walking, and the one who does the guard change, we call them changers. They're usually either badge holder, lower enlisted as sentinels, or NCOs, because that's their job as a non-commissioned officer, is to be the one who changes the guard, which are assistant relief commanders or relief commanders.
The ones standing guard, the walkers, they don't wear a rank on their uniform. Is that correct?
Correct. So no one, we don't outrank the unknowns, but also in the old guard, if you're an E4 or below, none of them wear rank either. It's only the NCOs that wear rank. But if I was out there as an NCO and I was walking the mat, I do not wear rank because to not outrank the unknowns.
Right. And did you ever have any moments, like I saw a video on YouTube, a bayonet was dropped on a man's foot and he didn't even react. He just kept going just as if nothing had happened. Did you ever have any moments similar to that?
I never had that happen to me, thankfully. That's one of the reasons why we train the ceremonial composure when we're out there, to not have any reaction to what's going on. There's moments when you're doing the weapons inspection or something, you might feel like the weapon is going to fall out of your hands, but all the training you put into that more or less prevents it. But no one's perfect, not even tomb guards. So accidents happen, but it's, what you do afterwards and how you go along with it. So the public don't see or don't even notice because they don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was just going to say. They wouldn't know that something was wrong until you reacted to it.
Correct.
If you don't react, they probably wouldn't know the difference.
Exactly.
And do you have a lot of times where the public try and cross the rope and get too close?
That happens more often than you think it would. A lot of it in the summertime is someone dropping a water bottle that comes across the plaza, or we have a fair number of foreign visitors and they may not understand like what our policies and procedures are and might try and cross or get underneath the rails for a better photo. And we just, step off the mat at port arms and tell them to go behind the chains and rails.
I'm sure most people probably don't realize that they're being disrespectful or even know that that's something that you're not supposed to do. But obviously, people always want to try and get in close and get the best picture angle.
Yes.
So, what part of that job did you enjoy the most?
Watching my soldiers grow, because when you're down there and you have the soldiers, so when I went down there, I was an E5 sergeant and my trainer was an E3 PFC. And so I had to be able to accept criticism and knowledge and feedback from someone who's lower, who was less ranked than I was. And then when you pass training and you start getting these other soldiers that were private first classes, the lower enlisted, and watching them grow to become NCOs themselves and start training soldiers. Because once you pass training, you are instantly a leader because you're training the next generation of tomb guards. That was a really cool thing to watch transpire.
Okay, so after you pass the training, then you almost immediately get someone else that you have to mentor as well?
Correct.
And what would you say the most challenging part of the job was?
The most challenging part for me physically was the rifle manual, because when the rifle butt was on the ground, the bayonet would come up to basically almost my shoulder. So trying to manipulate that weapon as small as I was and make it look like, someone who's 6'1", and they make it look weightless, that was a big challenge for me.
Are there height restrictions for the tomb guards?
So for the old guard, females are supposed to be 5'8" and males are supposed to be 5'10". A lot of that is for ceremonial purposes. So they all, because the infantry do the majority of the ceremonies and they all need to look similar. And that has to do with, if you're lifting a casket, you don't want a shorter person and a taller person, and it makes it a little more difficult to do that. But just like a lot of things in the military, there's waivers for things. And if you restricted females to 5'8" in the old guard, you wouldn't have a lot of your support MOSs there, whether it be female medics, MPs, or admin personnel. You wouldn't have a lot of those folks there. When I went down, there were enough other soldiers that were relatively, and I use that term loosely, close to my height, that it didn't make it too much of a significant difference out there. But it allowed me to still go down there and train and become a tomb guard.
And how tall are you?
I'm 5'5".
Yeah, I'm 5'6", and I don't consider that to be very tall, but There's definitely times where I feel like I'm the tallest female around in the forces.
I
Oh,
never felt short out there. Everyone, like, I would see a picture and I was like, I just never felt that short next to you out there.
hmm.
So I guess it's all perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Another interesting thing about the Tomb Guards is that the badge, it's the only military badge that can be revoked for any action that brings disrespect to the tomb during the lifetime of the Tomb Guard. And I did look on the website and see that there were a number of badges, and they don't even have the name anymore. It just has the badge number and it just says revoked in capital letters. So, what sort of action or behavior might lead someone to getting their badge revoked?
You could end up with UCMJ action or Uniform Code of Military Justice. You do something against the law, basically, or a DUI, or go to the extreme. I don't know. I don't think this has ever happened, but like say you even committed, a heinous crime,
Hmm.
and it brings discredit upon the tomb and and what we do. So then it can be revoked. We take their name off too because they don't, deserve to be, acknowledged with being a tomb guard.
Right, because even if their name is still on there, it's still giving them that recognition.
Correct.
And I did also read something, I'm not sure if it's true, that said if you're a tomb guard that you're not allowed to drink any alcohol for the rest of your life. Is that true, or was that just a online
No,
myth?
that's an online myth. There's quite a
Okay.
few of those saying like no tobacco, no cursing, no TV, and things like that. The no TV thing comes from when you're in training. If we have we had a TV down there in quarters, but if you had enough time to watch TV, that means that your uniforms are perfect and your rifle manual is perfect. So like you were not allowed to watch TV during that time because you needed to be training.
Yeah, that would be pretty extreme. No TV for the rest of your life.
Correct. So, but I don't, no drinking, it might used to have been a thing. I've never heard any, definitive proof of that, but that's, how things get spread.
And then for the soldiers that live in the barracks while they're tomb guards, they're sort of allowed to go out and go about their daily business as usual if they need to, like go to the gym or
Oh
um
yeah. So you have, when you're working down there, you're only down at the tomb during, your working day. Your barracks are on, up what we call up top, which is main post where all the other soldiers are at. And you can go out, go to the gym, all that stuff.
reading some things online definitely makes it seem sort of different than it is. Like I picture, everyone just being in the barracks below, and when they're awake, they're giving speeches and presentations, and then doing guard duty, and then when they're not doing that,
Mm.
then they're back in the barracks, sort of thing.
Yeah, I can walk you through kind of like what my typical day was down there if you want.
Sure, yeah, that'd be awesome.
So I'd probably wake up around like 3 o'clock or so in the morning to kind of like get up, get around, make sure all my stuff was ready to go. Get in to quarters probably around 4:30 to pull my uniform out of my locker, steam it out, make sure it's all shiny and anything didn't happen overnight because sometimes or you miss something the night before when you were prepping it. What we call water our shoes off. So get a little cotton ball and some water and just do a quick coat over our shoes to really help the shine pop. And then we would do PT from 5 to 6, and then from 6 to 7 or 6 to 6:30, we would what we call gig quarters. So before I accepted quarters for the day, we would make sure it's cleaned.
Okay.
So the kitchen was clean, the bathroom was clean, the sleeping area was clean, the locker room was clean, gym was clean. And then once we accepted quarters, I would myself or the badge holders would gig or inspect our new men's uniform to see who earned the bolo for the day. And then they would get posted at 7 to 8. And then, so at 7:45, if they were new men who were trying to earn the walk, they would get in the knowledge corner and we would quiz them on their knowledge to see, if they were earning the walk or if it wasn't an earnable walk, a badge holder would go up. That's how it was when I was down there. Some things always change.
So the tomb is guarded 24/7, and we see these videos online of the changing of the guard where they inspect the rifle. So how often does that happen? Like at what intervals?
In the winter, it's every hour on the hour, and during our summer hours, it's every 30 minutes. So top of the hour and bottom of the hour.
And that still also happens overnight, or is that a different
Oh,
protocol?
Overnight, it's a little different. It can be anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, but we're out there in our like camouflage uniform so that because at night, it's dark, we need to be able to see a little bit more, but we're still guarding at night, and it allows you to do different trainings as opposed to just walking the entire time, which I mean, a lot of that you do when you're still in training. So it's still guarded all throughout the night, either at 1 or 2 hour intervals, and then it allows us to go out on the plaza at night and train as a relief to make our guard changes better and things like that.
So after working at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, where did you go with your military career?
I transferred over into the Army National Guard, which is one of our other components of the Army, and I went to OCS, so I commissioned as an officer, and I'm working on going from the Guard to the Reserves. The Guard is our state, and then the Reserves is federal, but it's still the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year for our reserve forces.
So are you still a military police now?
Yes.
What sort of things do you do
I
outside
like
of
to
the military?
do woodworking, build furniture. I did a lot of that for my husband and I. We had our first house, and I built a lot of the furniture. I built like a custom closet. I rebuilt a kitchen island, built tables and a bed and side tables and stuff like that.
Is that something that you learned from your parents when you were younger, or did you take that up later in life?
I learned basic skills from my dad growing up, but a lot of it was kind of like self-taught going along the way, which is pretty simple today with the internet. It makes it extremely easy, and you just kind of apply what the directions say to do.
Yeah, that's true. I guess these days you can sort of find anything on
Yeah.
YouTube. And what about sports, or what do you do to keep yourself fit?
For sports, I played soccer throughout college, and I've done a little bit here and there since then, but now it's mostly just working out to stay fit.
To stay fit for the job?
Yep. So for the military, staying fit, and then on the civilian side, I'm a federal wildlife officer with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. So I stay fit for that as well.
Oh, that would be a really interesting job. So you're sort of patrolling in the backwoods areas looking for fish and wildlife violations?
More or less, it's kind of like being a game warden on the federal level. So I work on national wildlife refuges,
Oh, yeah.
whereas like the National Park Service does the parks, and the Forest Service works, with the U.S. Forest Service in those areas. So it's just dependent on the agency you work for.
Mm-hmm. So do you have to have some backcountry skills for that?
Yes and no. It just depends on your refuge. Like, say, for example, Long Island, there's 10 refuges on Long Island. You wouldn't think that Long Island, New York, there's 10 wildlife refuges
Mm-hmm.
where you can, boat ATV or drive my truck. Like, that's how I patrol, is using those different skills. And then if you're up in Alaska, you might need to become a bush pilot and be able to fly up there and do cross country skiing or snowshoeing.
Do you have any pets?
We have a cat. His name is Tom. He kind of adopted us. He was a stray cat down at our house, and when we lived in Alabama. And he has, we had 6 acres of land down there, so he's kind of like a free roaming cat. And he's like, "Oh, who are these new people living here?"
Yeah.
And now he is more or less domesticated. Loves being inside, but with all the comforts of pillows and blankets, but also enjoys the outdoors still. We go on
Exactly.
walks.
Yeah, that's sort of like yeah, my little dog was she was just like a beach dog. I had some family living in the Dominican and they were involved in this rescue group. So they found her and I saw a picture and I was like, oh, she's super cute. And she was a little more crazy before. Like she would kind of eat the garbage and things like that. But now she's just like, yeah, I'll be really picky with my food and only sit on comfy fleece blankets.
Sounds about right.
So what's next for you? Will you stay in the reserves for a good amount of time?
Yeah, probably at least until what would equivalent to a good retirement age. I enjoy serving, so
Yeah, same. Like, so I'm a reservist, but I've been in for 12 years now, but almost all of that time has been on full-time contracts. So I'm sort of like a, I guess, a career reservist.
yeah. So my active duty career is about 6.5 years long, and this October I'll hit 9 years total. And my husband hits 10 years in November with the Navy.
Okay, and does he
So
deploy a lot?
Well, when he was active, he did a couple of deployments on his ships, and then he went reserves, and now he, I don't know, that might be similar to what you're doing, but basically you're like full-time reserve,
Yeah.
where you still are almost like you're working active duty because you work every day.
In Canada, we have contracts, so you can get ones that are a few months at a time and also like 2 or 3 years at a time.
Hmm.
So right now I'm working in my unit. I'm one of the only reservists. Most of the other people are full-time, like what we call in Canada reg force, which is, I
Hmm.
guess, the equivalent of active duty. So
Yes.
essentially we're doing the same job, but I'm just a reservist.
Yeah, he's done that. Like we can do the same thing in the Army Reserve too. Pick up anywhere from a couple months to years, or we can do what we call AGR, Active Guard Reserve, where you're basically full time supporting the reserve unit. It's almost like you're on active duty, but like for him, he's not on ships now.
Right, okay. Can they call you up and say like you have to go here, or is it more optional for you?
Like for the reserves and stuff, it'd be kind of like what I put in. So say I put in for what we would call contract. It's for a certain area, but there's also ones where it's like, okay, well, just I get picked up. Now where are you telling me to go? So
Hmm.
it's kind of it could be either one.
In Canada, as a reservist, you're never really put in a position where you have to go somewhere you don't want to. It's kind of the best of both worlds because you can make the most of your career and sort of have all these different options and pick what you want to do.
Yeah, it's really
So
neat.
I guess we can wrap this up. Thank you so much for your time today. And I was hoping that you would be able to recite the Sentinel's Creed to finish us off.
I sure will. Again, thank you for thinking of me and being able to put this together. It's a really awesome idea. So, without further ado, the Sentinel's Creed. My dedication to this sacred duty is total and wholehearted, and the responsibility bestowed on me never will I falter. And with dignity and perseverance, my standard will remain perfection. Through the years of diligence and praise and the discomfort of the elements, I will walk my tour in humble reverence to the best of my ability. It is he who commands the respect I protect, his bravery that made us so proud. Surrounded by well meaning crowds by day, alone in the thoughtful peace of night, this soldier will in honor glory rest under my eternal vigilance. Simon, 1971.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to stay up to date with the latest episodes, please hit the subscribe button.